Our muse letter O is received with great curiosity the instant it is uttered. And that actually makes us happy because curiosity is all about pursuit of knowledge, and we are here to make the experience of learning liberating and engaging. Learning is highly rewarding when we see the whole picture and not when it is fragmented, disjointed, and out of sync. So the choice of the letter O is symbolic of that whole picture in a nutshell. O symbolizes science in art or vice versa. It represents the sound O, the mathematical and philosophical nothingness or vastness, as in zero and infinity. The shape O is remarkable. It is an extension of many things. The shapes, cyclical, circular, spherical, cylindrical, represent the most mundane as well as the exhilarating aspects of the world we occupy, be it the cyclical nature of life or time or the compelling world of quantum physics and astronomy. Mathematical, astronomical, philosophical, and all areas of knowledge occur in art, and it is indispensable. At O, it is poetry at the median. So today, as we mark O's 2 years, let us prepare to, in due course, be able to see the whole picture. And that can only be done by acknowledging that art and science are one, far more than equals. Discussions on equality has had an extensive and excessive history, be it of gender, class, caste, race, rights, opportunities, and many more. But what of art and science, especially when it is about oneness more than equality? Climate change is here. We're all suffering today, no matter where we are on planet Earth. How do we take everything that we know about climate change to people? Among other things, one critical role art plays is in communication and expression. Since we are stressing on the momentousness of including art in dialogues on sustainability, I'm very happy to introduce all of you to one of our trustees, Ragini Rainu. Ragini is an acclaimed bhakti singer. For Ragini, immersing herself in the poetry of ancient Sufi saints is redemptive, and she wishes to make its profundity as popular as it can get. She is a Gandaband Shagirt of late Sri Pandit Bhajan Supuri, Padma Shri. She takes special interest in composing and writing. She sings Sufi, Gurbani and Bhajan, and she has performed before national and international audiences. Today, though, we will have to make do with hearing her voice in prose. Ragini, I request you to please deliver the welcome address. Can I have a round of applause for Ragini, please?
Thank you very much for inviting me to deliver the welcome address as we complete 2 years. We began our journey during the lockdown, carrying out our activities online from our homes. We even marked our first year online, but I'm extremely humbled and indebted to see everyone here and to release that we could gather here today on-site and not online. We managed to push through one of the most challenging times of our lives. We learned many lessons these past couple of years on sustainability especially. Now we know that Global Sustainable Development Report originated in 2012 in the outcome of the Rio Plus 20 conference on sustainable development titled The Future We Want, when member states were laying the groundwork for the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the 17 associated SDGs. Now, when halfway point report is due this year in September, if we take stock now too, what should I say? The power of art is undermined and not recognized. Over time, as an artist, I have come to understand and learn that responsibilities are to be taken and not waited around hoping someone will assign it to you, especially in case of India. We know that in India, art and artists do not get equal representation in the formal economy, like in case of other sectors, because art, for most part, is qualitative and not quantitative. But still, measures can be taken to address this disparity. I believe O is one such initiative. मंजिल तो सबकी एक है, रास्ते हैं जुदा. मंजिल तो सबकी एक ही है, रास्ते हैं जुदा, कोई पतझड़ से गुजरता है, कोई सहरा से गया. Art connects people, events, ideas, communities, countries. On that note, I welcome our very able speaker, Dr. Commander Arnab Das. Commander Das is a researcher, maritime strategist, and an entrepreneur, and one of India's most celebrated contemporary artists, Gigi Scaria. I welcome all our trustees present here. All of us, including me, are committed to this cause. Welcome Puran Chandra Pandey, Shivraj Prasad, Lakshmi Krishna Kumar, two of our trustees who, although couldn't join us here today due to prior commitments, but are very much with us, Venkatesh Ramakrishna and Alan Kelliker. A warm welcome to all of you gathered here today, showing us your support and encouragement as we complete 2 years. Thank you.
Since we are talking about sustainability as the heart of today's event, it is our great honor and privilege that we have amongst us Mr. Puran Chandra Pandey. Mr. Pandey advises governments, private sector, and UN agencies in Asia, Africa, and Europe on sustainability, climate diplomacy, and development cooperation. And he also is a member of the Board of Trustees World Food Programme Trust for India, and he's also a British Chevening Scholar. And thank you very much for making it. I request Lakshmi to welcome him. He's definitely part of the family, but we wanted to welcome you and thank you for being here. And now we will quickly move on to our presentations. And the presentations are all themed around the basic philosophy of awe, that is art and science. Our first speaker is Dr. Arnab Das. As Ragini just said, he is a researcher, maritime strategist, and entrepreneur. He's the founder and director of the Maritime Research Center that is working on a unique concept of underwater domain awareness. That's its main focus. He has several publications and a book to his credit. He served, of course, in the Indian Navy for over 2 decades and completed his PhD, his master's and his PhD from IIT Delhi. And he has undertaken several R&D projects during his tenure at IIT Delhi. I request Commander Das to please make your presentation.
Thank you very much, Nilanjana, for the introduction, and O Foundation for inviting me. I'll talk about what I do, but it is indeed an honor for me to be here among all of you, and the bridge or the connection between art and science, of course, is extremely important. And anything that has to be meaningful has to be multidisciplinary. And multidisciplinary in the true sense, everybody coming together. So let me start with my presentation. I've called it Tyranny of Small Decisions because many times our focus is in a direction which probably, just to give you a very broad thing of the entire 75% of the world is underwater, right? Where 70% is marine and 5% is freshwater. But when I tell people about my work, that I'm working in the underwater domain, many people are not able to connect. So if 75% of the world is not important, and I'm not sure, but I'm quite confident that this would be the first time you are hearing somebody talking specifically on the underwater. So that's why, I'll give you many more examples. And 90% is below the water, right? The vast oceans or the freshwater systems. So there is so much more to be looked at, and I would like to draw your attention, and sustainability has been mentioned, climate change has been mentioned. If you do not focus on the underwater, then how will you ensure sustainability? So, people talk about environment impact assessment. Even big financial institutions, there is a separate budget for environment impact assessment. But do we really do a comprehensive and an inclusive environment impact assessment? Certificates are given. Some studies are also done. I'm not trying to undermine what is being done. But if you see underwater, sound is the only signal that propagates efficiently underwater. I mean, very basic measure is speed of sound in air is 345. Speed of sound underwater is 1500. So it is 5 times more efficient underwater. But somehow, and having said that, more life is underwater, right? I mean, all of you will agree with that. But acoustic habitat degradation is something which I'm sure you've not heard before. I hope I'm right. Because underwater habitat is all about sound. And the human activities, I think all of us agree that the most dangerous species on earth is the humans, right? So all our activities make it extremely difficult for the marine mammals or the freshwater species underwater. So I would like to draw your attention on some of the things. So when I say underwater domain awareness framework, the framework looks at what kind of policy interventions, what kind of technology intervention, and what kind of capacity and capability building that is required. And instead of just using the generic term capacity and capability, I would like to use the term acoustic capacity and capability. So if you look at the 21st century new global order, the larger global interactions or the so-called strategic interactions are happening in the tropical waters. In the last century, it was in the temperate waters. So the larger underwater technology development or underwater activities, well, more suited, or the know-how that was generated was more suited to the to the temperate and the polar region. I mean, it was typically the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap, where a lot of, war has been the genesis of a lot of technology development or know-how. But typically, if you see, the West has invested significantly during the Cold War and developed a lot of technology and know-how. And now this is a time when they are trying to push that to the rest of the world. Whereas this doesn't work in our waters. So if you look at the present so-called the strategic space, Indo-Pacific, by definition, it is the tropical waters of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So if you do not recognize the tropical conditions, whatever be the application, we will go horribly wrong. And that is something we need to be really aware of. There are unique challenges and there are unique opportunities also. I mean, the biodiversity in the tropical waters is the highest, is the most, rich biodiversity that we have. Even in terms of the mineral resources, there is a lot that is available. But many times you will see the countries or the nations in this part of the world is actually suffering the challenges and not able to take advantage of the opportunities. So how to maximize or how to manage the challenges and opportunities in the optimum manner is something we need to really look at. And that's where I think the underwater domain awareness will help. Anything that you do, if you talk about sustainability, it has to be a balance between people, economy, and nature. You can't be saying that we will not do development. You can't be saying, you will not indulge into anything. You have to do it. And how do we find the balance is something we need to really look at. And to find that balance, awareness, sometimes we call it situational awareness, but domain awareness would be the most important thing. And what is the unique technology? If you see underwater, acoustic technology becomes the key. And if you see, acoustics is not a subject in any of our academic institutions in this country, and I think very few globally. Just want to give you an example of freshwater dolphins. If you look at the shape of the dolphin, there's a lot of difference between the way a freshwater dolphin looks and a marine dolphin would look. The particular reason is, if you look at Darwin's theory, anything that you don't use, it will become a vestigial organ. The underwater in the freshwater systems are very, there's muddy water, so the visibility is very low. So over a period of time, they have lost sight. These freshwater dolphins are supposed to be blind. They are just able to distinguish between day and night, but they can't use the sight very effectively. So what they have is what we call acoustic vision. They perceive the environment around them through sound. So the sound becomes a very, very important sensory tool for them. But typically, when you see conservation happening, there's a lot of, and India is very blessed. The freshwater dolphins are in Amazon, in Yangtze, in China. In India, we are blessed. It is in Ganga, it is in Brahmaputra, it's in Karnafuli, which is coming from Nepal and Indus. If I give you the numbers, in Brahmaputra, 95 census counted, I think, 3,000. 2005 counted 300. And 2015, the numbers are not yet out. People have said some numbers, but it's really bad. But lots of money has been spent on conservation. I have got nothing against anybody. I think we have a problem of, this science versus even technology. You're talking about art and science, but even science and technology, there's a huge problem of collaboration and cooperation between even people who are doing science and people who are doing technology. Acoustics comes under technology. Largely, conservation is driven by science people, marine science people. And there's a lot of gap. So people have talked about various reasons, but I think acoustic habitat degradation would be one of the key things which has to be recognized. I was involved in one of the projects with WWF, Tokyo University, and we were trying to, because there is hardly any data. We don't even know, it's very generic to say they get affected, but you have to have a quantitative and a qualitative analysis. So I was part of a team which designed that right from the hardware to software and, how the analysis will be done. But I think now India as a nation has to focus on many such things. The dimensions are different and we have to really keep track of things. And, we have a lot of big declarations, Sagar Vision, Sagar Mala and everything. But what comes with it is also the environmental component. These are some of the incidences like, in June 2015, a 40 feet blue whale was washed ashore. Then in 2016, we had another incident of a 50 feet bride whale. And mind you, these are not supposed to be seen north of, their habitat was supposed to be south of Sri Lanka. But I have done a detailed paper on this, and it was basically the anti-piracy operations that started in 2009, which has changed the entire shipping pattern, and so it has made a lot of different impact on the habitat of the big whales in our region. And in 2018, in the Maharashtra coast alone, 720 kilometers, there were 80 big whale stranding incidents that were reported. The point I'm trying to make is when we talk about global policy and, we talk about big things, we really need to be very comprehensive and inclusive. Anti-piracy operation is important, but we had no understanding of how it will have an impact on the sustainability. So I think there is also a requirement that we need to look at this. And the third one is 90 pilot whales stranding in Tuticorin. So, and the different researchers have given their different interpretations, but I have reported that this is possibly because of the acoustic habitat degradation that is happening in our region. Now you look at, I talked about the freshwater dolphins. We have a huge project now being driven on the inland water transport. And 20,000 kilometers of waterways are being planned, and there's a lot of work going on. National waterway number 1 is from Banaras to Haldia. It is important for development, but a bit of underwater domain awareness will definitely help us navigate this better. Underwater domain awareness is not just about the noise, but even the tropical waters are very different in terms of our sediment pattern, sediment transport pattern. Like if you look at the Brahmaputra, anybody who's not seen the Brahmaputra will probably not believe the average width of the Brahmaputra is 5 kilometers. And there are places where it is 8 kilometers wide, so you can't even see the other side. But it is very shallow and it changes course, very regularly. So if you want to have inland water transport, it is very likely that you will not have enough waters below your keel. So navigability itself is very important for any water transport. So I don't think the West can tell us how we sort out our, I mean, they're too happy to send dredgers, and now dredging has become the de facto tool for sediment management, which is, I mean, I don't want to name, but there are massive projects which have become unviable because dredging became the de facto only solution. I mean, the cost of the project has gone so high that, it is just not viable. So we need to understand that, see, it is the Nordic countries which have invested in heavy engineering, and now they want to sell those products to us. If we don't decide what we want, people will give you what they have, not you what you want. So that is typically what is happening. I mean, many of our projects, so we need to really invest in our own indigenous R&D. And the funniest part is that traditional knowledge is being completely ignored. I mean, India is, a 10,000 year civilization, right? And it is not that inland water transport has not started now. It has been going on. But we have completely ignored what was going on. We want to, whatever modern science and technology wants to give us, we are completely replacing traditional knowledge. I mean, that is something we need to really think about. I'll not go into the details of it. Now, even when you look at water resource, today we are 20% water short. More than the shortage, the worry is about the distribution. Now, if you look at the Brahmaputra or the northeast, it is the only area where there is surplus water. But the entire development plan has to make sure there is hardly any development there, whatever be the reason. So we have to, now water has to become the very important component of the larger development plan. I mean, I don't want to go into the details of, what is the level of groundwater and all that. So you have to have a sense of water availability. Our dams, most of our fresh water is stored in dams. Most of our dams are more than 100-year-old and they are more than 50% silted. The result is that during monsoon, it is flooding in the down plains, and, in the dry season, we are short of water. So these are very basic things which require, and I think again, underwater domain awareness becomes an important thing. I mean, we did some work in Pune in the Khadakwasla lake, and many people said that this silt is very good for farming. We'll give it to the farmers. But we must understand that in India, the average farm size is 1.1 acres, right? Even for agriculture, optimum size for viability is 2.3. So forget about that part. But which farmer in India can afford to even carry this from the lake to their farm? Number one. Number two, between the Rabi and the Kharif, there is not even 1 month gap. So how will you even, but if you do we've done some surveys, acoustic surveys in Khadakwasla. It is soft silt and people are using heavy dredgers which can't even pick it up. So again, acoustics becomes very important, and that's whatever is there underwater can be used for a better purpose. I mean, we are a developing country. You can have even brick making plants which can produce 20,000 bricks in a day. So government has allocated, Maharashtra government has allocated 900 crores for desilting, whereas the government should be making money, right? I mean, how much can the government, and the average size, the size of Khadakwasla is 500 square kilometers. I mean, if you just look at the numbers also, it doesn't match up. So what I'm saying is that there is a lot of focus required. There's a lot of research required for them to even understand. More than resource availability, quality management is even a bigger issue. If you look at it, there are so many places where the water is completely contaminated, whether it is biological or chemical contamination. I mean, what the Green Revolution has done to us is a different story, but there is many other places, even because of natural causes also, there are the underwater, or the groundwater has got contaminated. So do we have, in today's world, do we have a system where if you look at your house, you get water in your tap and you get water in your bathrooms, right? We are flushing fresh water, which is high quality, middle class and above. And there are people who don't have good quality water for even domestic purpose. So even for industrial purposes, high quality fresh water is being used. So and even when water comes in your tap, do you have a way to know how good the quality is. I mean, today in today's world, you can have a mobile app which can tell you, what is the quality of all the 28 parameters of water quality can be provided to you on a mobile phone. But I think somebody will have to look at it. So water quality and another bigger problem is water quality and water resource are being driven by two different ministries. There is a whole lot of things that we need to look at. I mean, I would like to call it freshwater management rather than water resource management and water quality management. There's a term which is used very often, maritime domain awareness. The origin is very interesting. It actually started from the International Maritime Organization. Their technical committee started using this word. Definition is very wide, anything that is happening in the maritime space. But the realization of this term was, I would call it event-driven, after the 9/11 in the US and the 26/11 in India. So this part of the world, this became a very glamorous word to be used. And, particularly in the Navy, I've seen many people using it, throwing jargons. But my worry here is that it remained security driven, and that became a big limitation for anybody else to participate. And consequently, it remained on the surface. So, I mean, these are the four stakeholders: security, economy, climate change or environment, and science and technology. Now, if you look at maritime security, we had the Kasab incident. He came by a surface boat. Are we still hoping that the next guy will also come by a surface boat? So there are many questions that we need to answer. So there's a lot of requirement to focus on the underwater in a very, very different scale. Migration is a big issue, in the east of India. This can be, Rohingya crisis is just tip of the iceberg. So, I'll not elaborate too much on this, but I think there is some serious concerns that we need to look at, just from the security perspective, both internal and external security. And after the pandemic, you can understand what can happen to the transboundary rivers. Now, if you look at the blue economy, of course, the Indian Ocean is the hub for energy security. There are economic engines on one side and the supply is coming from one side. So the Indian Ocean has become a very, very critical area where, it's like creating trouble in your backyard. China maintains at least 20 naval ships in our area. But that apart, if you look at, we are increasingly looking at the sea for food security, right? But if you look at it, the global fish stock is on the decline since 1996. But the bycatch today is of the order of 80%. So how do you reconcile? On one end, we have shortage, and on the other side, the bycatch is almost 80%. So again, if you have to regulate, you have to really invest on underwater domain awareness and make sure that, in India, there are places where there is overfishing and there are places where fish is dying of old age. So how do you regulate? How do you make sure that, there are many stories, many things. There are, instances where entire flourishing coastal village has become a dead zone because, they took some measures and the entire fish population died and the whole ecosystem, the entire eco chain had a breakdown. We talk about deep sea mining, whole thing about EV and all that, but do we really know what is happening? And, and there are lobbies. Some people say, you have created enough mess on land, so don't touch the ocean. The guys who are talking about it, they are the ones who have messed up the land. Now, when they are on the other side, they are preventing the rest of the world, the developing countries to even get the resources that they need for their bare necessities. And again, like I talked about the Brahmaputra, you can see the traditional fishing ways, they had a very, very clear sustainability agenda. But we want to completely replace that with the modern tools that we have. So there has to be a balance. There has to be a very calibrated shift. And of course, I talked about the acoustic habitat degradation. You can see these things are happening and even disaster management, I was in Tokyo after the Fukushima disaster. And, it's not that I'm trying to say that we can prevent a natural disaster, but with better, early warning system, we can really minimize the loss of life and property. There are many instances. Climate change is a very important area. And if you have to really do climate change assessment, underwater will become the key factor. And we really need to invest on technology to make sure that we have the right. The digital transformation is very critical. I mean, all the investments we are doing, one climate change incident and everything is gone. So we have to really focus on that as well. And of course, science and technology. I mean, we have very little understanding of the ecosystem that exists underwater, how the different components of the ecosystem interact with each other. So there's a lot of study to be done. A lot of smart technology is required, and it is only the digital transformation which is going to be viable. So I'll leave it at that. So this is the framework that we have built. If you look at the four sides of the cube, the four stakeholders: security, blue economy, environment, and science and technology. But the core will remain the acoustic capacity and capability building. And why I'm saying this, just to give you a sense of what the numbers say. In the Navy, when we bought sonars from the temperate, I mean, we bought sonars from Russia, a particular sonar gave you range of 32 nautical miles. The same ship or the submarine sailed and comes to the Indian waters or the tropical waters, performance degradation comes down to 6 nautical miles. So it's like 70% degradation. So your asset deployment becomes 8 times, right? Now, the West is too happy to, it's not just India. This entire Indian Ocean has been kept in a way. The narrative is that, doomsday is very near and, you need to invest. But they are selling you hardware which they have. If you do not get the right performance, what are we talking about? So we have to focus on acoustic capacity, and whether it is for security or for blue economy, anything, if the acoustic capacity is not effective, it makes no sense. If the sonar is not giving you the range, so everybody needs to come together. I mean, you see, there is so much fragmentation among even the research organizations. We all need to come together, invest, and then take it forward. If you look at the vertical construct here, we do need to do a lot of sensing. We have no idea about our conditions. We have no data on our, various species or whatever you want to call it, various parameters. I mean, even the water quality, we have no idea. So we need to invest and then look at, many places we have even imported the policy also. Even the deployment pattern. If you are getting 70% degraded performance, then how can we even copy the deployment pattern? So there's a lot of work to be done. And I think, and even when you look at the youth, we talk about demographic advantage. So this can be an alternate. The maritime India is today 20 lakh square kilometer, but now we have applied for an extension from 200 nautical miles. It will go to 350 nautical miles. So it will almost double. Now, maritime India and terrestrial India is almost going to be equal. But the contribution of the maritime India to the GDP is not even 4%. So if we really want to be a country with 5 trillion economy or beyond, even now we have declared 40 trillion economy in 2047, right? If we don't use our assets which are available to us, then how are we going to balance, So something we need to really look at. So, I think I'll skip this. It can be brought down to various smaller things. Sediment management, again, many components can come together. So this is one interesting, how various components. In 1988, India got its first nuclear submarine from Russia, and it was supposed to be deployed for the first operation off Visakhapatnam in the east coast. When the submarine sat down in position, the entire sonar screen got blanked out. So there was, of course, panic. They had a brainstorming. Somebody said, sir, blast transmission karenge, theek ho jayega. So the captain, of course, had gone around the world and he was much aware. So he agreed and, they did blast transmission. It got fine. Now, I would take you to another incident, the Nautilus, which was the nuclear submarine deployed by the Americans. It was supposed to be launched in 1952, came out in 1954. The Scripps Institute of Oceanography in US did a snapping shrimp mapping of the entire world. Strategic submarines or nuclear submarines are not for your own waters. And that study says that snapping shrimps are in the tropical waters. And they generate sound of the order of 200 dB, reference 1 micropascal, whereas the biggest mammal on earth, which is blue whale, generates 196 dB. Blue whales are in single digits. A school of blue whales will be not more than 10. Snapping shrimp are in millions in one snapping shrimp bed. So you can imagine, what can happen, when they vocalize, even if half of them vocalize, it's good enough to create a racket. So when I started my organization, I thought that this is one project I must do immediately. So when we started working on it, we realized there are 14 subspecies of snapping shrimps in our Indian subcontinent. Now, habitat mapping is just one phase. What we want is soundscape mapping. So each of these 14 subspecies have their own vocalization pattern. The trigger is different. So we got on, it took us about 3 years. Different people have worked, and now we have developed this whole tool. Now, I was talking to somebody very senior and I said, sir, I was very happy that we have done this. So he asked me, Arnab, what are you doing for the community? So I had no answer. So he said, 30 years back, I was in Vietnam and those guys were laughing at us that, you have so much shrimps in this area, and shrimp is a very lucrative species. So does it make any sense to you? So what we did is the same tool that we developed, we converted into a tool for shrimp farming. See, in farming, there is something called an APY analysis, area under cultivation, productivity and yield. And this kind of a tool, which is a digital tool, right? We have all the parameters and, algorithms run and they tell you what to do. And you can do various interventions. I mean, a spatio-temporal map, or today the UN calls it marine spatial planning. It can tell you where you should do farming or when you should do and all that inputs, and government can do intervention accordingly and automation can be brought in. So we did that for shrimp farming. Then now we are working on various aspects. I mean, we didn't get too much support for the shrimp farming, but somebody said, why don't you do this for seaweeds? And see, what happens is our coastal communities or riverine communities are not helped or not supported by the financial institution because of the high uncertainty in their practices. But this kind of tool can really bring down that uncertainty, and you can do, even shrimp farming is very lucrative, but it is very prone to disease outbreak. So you can actually do interventions before the outbreak happens. So such tools are very important, and that's what is the digital transformation that I'm talking about. And we have now started working on various other species where it can really bring down, the uncertainty, and more people will, it can become a proper business model. I think I'll stop here. Thank you.
Wow. That was quite the class. Commander, thank you so much. I think very, 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 very interesting things we learned. I'm sure many of you have questions. We will take them towards the end. But let's move on to our second presentation of this evening, to be done by artist Gigi Scaria. Gigi was born in Kerala, and after completing his Bachelor's of Fine Arts from the College of Fine Arts, Trivandrum, he moved to New Delhi and he completed a master's from Jamia Millia Islamia University. And both of his degrees were in painting, but he has developed a cross-media practice. He works across painting, photography, installation, sculpture, and video. His work explores urban development, particularly in relation to migration, economic development, and urban architecture. He is interested in the quality of social space in a drastically changing urban environment, and with concomitant implications on the psychological experience. I invite you to please make your presentation.
Hi. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Thank you, Lakshmi, for inviting me for this amazing podium, and also Arnab for an amazing, informative session which you have done. In fact, for me, none of this applicable to my presentation. All the data which you have seen, and all kinds of correct measurements of doing things regarding what one could do to the environment is probably a way ahead of my understanding in that connection, because these are I do work. I'm an artist, work in various aspects of visual art movement. In this, my major concerns were from the beginning was city and urban space, and how actually more and more because of the globalization and impact of all these new developments, and more how we actually urbanized the whole planet in one sense, that we are kind of expanding our territories from all the in, in all the natural environment which we have, and more concrete jungles which we are creating, and trying to build all the facilities within, and the kind of managerial huge task of wasting the whole the whole planet with a lot of trash, first of all. And the concerns are many, and I really don't think that I'm capable to talk about any of this in particular, because my focus is largely about the psychological impact of urban spaces and how the architectural and other areas. So because my area is more about some of the social aspects of how you actually deal with and live in a city, how actually you could continue living without being much disturbed by the surroundings, in one sense, that if at all possible. So then it also comes with a lot of critical questions about what is the ideal living, and what is the ideal habitat which one would have. What kind of communications you would actually initiate with the fellow beings, as well as the whole ecosystem. I mean, I'm not talking specifically about the ecosystem, because it's not like something which I have not been. I've been aware of it, but it's not that I'm completely focusing my works on that, because maybe I don't have that technological tools to talk about it in that level. But my attempt here is to express certain ideas and certain kinds of projects I've done. And I mean, I can't also show a lot of things. It's just limited it because the area here was water that I'm not very comfortable with, and I haven't done much in that direction. So so there is some reflections of how I used water in one or two occasions of my artwork. Then in general, I have done a lot of work around different exhibitions. I've used landscape and looking at the different kinds of landscape terrains and how that actually been affected generally. And I've done. It was in 2012, I think. I was invited for a fellowship grant in Melbourne, in Australia. So it was called McGeorge Fellowship, where this person called McGeorge actually given his house to the University of Melbourne, where and then he has also the grant is formed on his name. And one person, they invite artists and writers and residents who would actually come and stay in that house for the duration of maybe 2 months. Then they can reflect on, think about something which can happen later, in the sense it's more like an ideating and thinking workshop space. So I was there in the McGeorge house, and I stayed in Australia for 2 months. Then thinking back on, then the next year I was supposed to have an exhibition in Melbourne University, in Ian Potter Museum. So something which actually can reflect back onto the experience and connecting these two countries, is there something in common? So when I came back, and I had an extensive trip on many parts of India, and where I also have been to Kutch, Ran of Kutch, and some of the areas of Rajasthan. And mainly my focus was on to identify or to understand certain kind of similarities of the landscape between India and Australia. So in that context, I've kind of extensively shot in different parts. Then a set of photographs and some video works and one painting was part of the show. When I brought that back to Australia and showed in the Australian audience, so they actually probably almost recognized us in their own landscape. So they didn't actually think that was Indian landscape. especially many of the images which I showed in the Kutch, Ran of Kutch area and all. So, and on the back, I also had the same show in India, where even most of us also thought from Indian side, except the, something like this, obviously you could make this out. It can't be anywhere else other than India. But there are these vast landscapes which people couldn't immediately recognize where exactly it is from. So, in one sense, the whole idea of this project was to how these lands are connected, and what exactly, in terms of what to say, location specificity, how you actually disconnect yourself from the land, which is part, you think that is part of your land, but it could be by anyone and from any part. Well, these are a few images which I'm just showing. This is like two images superimposed. One is the Jaisalmer desert, and there's a city fort in the Jaisalmer, which kind of these are two images superimposed in one sense, digitally manipulated in one sense. What actually this show was also titled Dust, because my interest in many levels connect with what exactly happens once whatever we are with, everything can kind of completely erode and go. And it's not like there are cycles of what to say, the ice age, and so many other, we have been, and all kinds of evolutions have happened throughout in centuries, and millions and millions of years. Things have been developed and changed, and obviously all this can actually perish and go. And what will happen when again a human race would think about a habitat? And then that was obviously a part of another project which was titled the Ark. Some of the images of that also I will show here. So to all these thinking leads to that, once you kind of go to dust, and how actually exactly a new era of habitat making, or thinking about something which has to be constructed, and thinking which something have to be creatively made, how one would start from the beginning. So these are images of on the way. I think it was somewhere in the border of Gujarat and Rajasthan. There is a lot of the crush, the metal, this stone crushing units are placed for the cement factories. There are also huge big canals which are getting made, and this was like many years ago now, that this will be a different scene altogether. But then actually when you actually take photo of certain landscape, you probably don't intend, but the landscapes then when you actually look at it later, they will have a very different meaning comes out of all these images which you click. Because I have an extensive footage of kind of changing Delhi for the last maybe 15-20 years. I landed up here in 95, so 96, 97, maybe 2000 onwards I've been taking pictures all around the city, and the city in 2023 is completely different. And so you see all these malls, all the new developments started, all the new constructions have started, everything have been photographed. And after a point, when you look back to all these images, and this is what how the art actually work. It's not immediately, you probably doesn't make some sense to what you're doing, but in a later stage, many things started making sense differently. This is an image from the Little Run of Kutch, where they actually cultivate salt plains, yeah. And these are like, you could see this more like different routes. These are like water channels in between. This is an image almost at the entrance of the Great Run of Kutch. What you see that in circles is where a camel carrier can drop you, and then they take a circle and they will go back. So the later part you actually have to walk, and that is when you actually start experiencing almost like it's another world. And I don't know how many of you have been to Ran of Kutch, and if you have gone further ahead of it, to a point where you actually don't see you only see the horizon. And if you start running, you don't even know which direction you're running, and you probably won't be running straight. So you would always think. So for the first thing, I know, I mean, I also have never done any performance as such. So when I went that space, and I thought, I just wanted to experience the landscape, and you would actually run. So I had a person who is actually accompanying me, and he's kind of placed the camera on one location. Then I thought I'm running straight, and I just started running. So then I came back and looked at it. I was just vanished a little bit. I was kind of off somewhere else. Camera is in one side, and I was somewhere else. So it took a long time to get that shot right, because I ran many times to make one video just to experience that. I mean, I have a video of that, but I don't think I'll be able to show it here. So the experience of the landscape is something which directly strike with the kind of mindless construction which you have on the other side. So for me, it was also a break to get into this mode of creating something or thinking about it differently, because of I've been constructing a lot of work based on the structures which you see all around. It's just an example of one of the painting work I've done. So you see I use a lot of natural elements and motifs and how it actually been in a way incorporated by the structures which we all kind of hold, and how the urbanization is actually taking over anything and everything which is we think it's natural. This is a watercolor work done long back in 2009, and in fact this has a reference of the 18th or 19th century painting by Caspar David Friedrich. It's a German artist, a romantic painter. In fact, the image is that a person who is almost look similar, the similar gesture, standing in front of a vast landscape and looking at the landscape, and in which he kind of completely taken aback by the kind of sublimity of what he is looking at. But here I kind of referring to that image. Unfortunately, I don't have that image here. I should have brought that also to show. So here it's a kind of an Indianized version of the man looking at the jungle of constructed environment. Probably have the same kind of awe factor, but in a different manner. In that project which I was talking about, where I was photographing and taking it back to the Australian gallery. So this was referring to Uluru Rock. That's in the middle of Australia. A huge big rock which is massive, kilometers long in size, which actually has been understood as one of the very sacred place for the aborigines of the land. And obviously it's also very tough to reach there. It's almost like 2 or 3 days of drive to reach at the center. And it is supposed to be very sacred, and there are so many interesting stories about that place. People would go, and maybe someone would actually take a piece of stone as a souvenir, but can't sleep peacefully back home because there's always some kind of rattling and issues regarding the people are getting dreams or things. I mean, these are like, I don't know whether it is true or not, but then they can actually send it back, or so it has a kind of a weight of the land in various aspects, because there is a lot of myths functions in that area, and it's kind of a heart of something which is breathing. Or it says that what you see, the upper portion, and there is also much more down to the land, inside the land. So it's almost like a tip of the iceberg, the rock itself. So I was kind of looking at this, imagining that, what could have been the future of this, even this rock, even it's, considered to be such a precious stone, could actually eventually can go from there, and there could be a say a city developing over there. I mean, it's an imagination. So it's something like, the reflection of that is you could see as a city underneath. So another work done in Norway, in the fjords. So I was there for a residency for 2 months. What you see here is that I was actually staying on this side of this rock at that mountain, which you see is called Uksen. Uksen means ox. So it's a mountain in which you actually look at every morning. And in this side, there is also a small supermarket and there are a few houses. It's as you know that, it's a very non-populated area. For me, I was kind of, I was supposed to create a work with the local craftsman's involvement. So I kind of met a person who is a carpenter, and we both built that house, which was an exact model of the house which is there nearby. Then I made these Uksen's replica, and in a way put it in a kind of seesaw situation where in terms of try to understand what is the balance which we are making in terms of the built environment as well as the natural resources or places, what exactly happens there. So it could be the other way. I mean, this balance can completely go wrong. That was the whole idea of creating something like this. So this was then exhibited in that location. Then it was brought back. This is the one which I directly has some relationship with water. This was a project called Yamuna Elbe, and Elbe river is in Germany, and our Yamuna. So there was this project. Few artists have actually been involved to make a kind of connection and relationship between these. In Indian part, the organizers, especially Ravi Agarwal, who is also an environmental activist and artist, who invited me to take part in the Indian part of the area. So what they did, that they invited us to think about on the river Yamuna, bank of river Yamuna, close to the, if you know that there is this, the old bridge, which is close to, the ISBT area. That area they have chosen, and then they kind of artists were interacting or kind of somewhat responding to the river in different ways. That's a part of the work. So I kind of proposed this one. This is a fountain which I created, and this is actually placed very close to the Yamuna, and the water was pumped through it from the Yamuna, and it goes up, and as you can see, it goes almost like 70 feet high, and it goes back to the river. The idea was to create a system mechanism through which once the water goes on each level of the fountain, it actually should get purified. So there was ideas to have a purified plants inbuilt inside, which then once the water comes out, it actually will be even drinkable, or at least more less polluted at the end. But this was only for 10-15 days. The show was program was on, so it would have been very difficult to do the arrangement for the purification part. So I made the fountain. The fountain is also something which actually in the traditional understanding of the cityscape, a fountain comes with people would come and gather and chat around and enjoy the weather around, and and fountain also has a cool weather. So here I was just thinking of bringing this fountain here in order to bring people over to Yamuna and to look at the condition of the river. In one sense, bringing people to because we all know that Yamuna exists in Delhi and it actually passes through, but no one has any time to even, because we have even made the constructions against it so that the sewage can be brought in to the river. It has never been to look into the river and see a reflection of sun rays coming out. We have never seen that because that is not the way we actually built it, because we wanted to treat it as a sewage, So it was interesting to see that, the height in which water was going, and obviously because of the wind directions, sometimes it goes towards the other area, and you see, and you can't go close to it because the idea of bringing people to the fountain was completely vandalized because of the smell and the semi-solid water condition which comes out of the river. So it's a highly polluted river, as everyone knows. So this was precisely the point, to make something of this size as well, because you see the magnitude of it. If you make something small, you don't actually get to notice. So there's a small clip. It has no sound, so you can see that how it works in that space. Well, this was another project proposed in Kuvam River in Chennai, part of one Max Muller Goethe Institute involvement with artists and researchers and people. In fact, the work did not take place because of the issues with the site, and there was permission issues about a lot of areas, because many people, it was also an international project where people from different parts of the world were participating. They all had proposals to make. Proposal they have made, including me. But then there was last moment, there was some issues regarding because the government changed, and the social concerns, security issues, and the river areas were not any public area in India. You actually vandalize this without any purpose, but if there is something constructively you wanted to do something over there, you will not get permission, because that your intentions are always been under question. So my idea was to create something like this. This is this is basically a wash basin structure in which I was trying to do basically what happens is that you see the fresh water coming from the top, and getting used by the subsequent wash basins, and finally you get to the bottom and water will be completely polluted. In one sense, it's also about how the distribution take place, and who is afford to have fresh water and who is not. So it's probably talks about slightly more about the social disparities in terms of an affordability of clear water. So this was the kind of plan, and obviously there was the pipeline system would be down, and there will have a channel, and more water will actually because it's an estuary where you actually the sea is there and there is a river coming in. So that is where I was kind of proposing it to happen, so that people could actually move around and see how these water functions in that particular area. Most of these are like could be conceived from the real understanding of the situation. But largely when you look at it, it's more like an artwork. So an artwork can actually raise questions, may not have an answer completely, but it actually can generate certain kinds of areas of questioning. Well, in this also in one sense talks about the development, and I was talking about an arc show which talks about what happens once the arc is directly connected to the Noah's ark was in reference that that the ark would actually changes even though it actually holds the habitat for the future, but then probably it changes its courses from a wooden ark to something which is an atomic center, which actually create more of destructions in one sense. So it's a shift from one to another. It's not always be the highest form of developments. It could actually be another level of the massive destruction from one to another. Something of that was the idea. It's the last video work. It's part of this another show. Basically, it then reflects the different apartment buildings are kind of lightning in that particular space. So I think I would stop here, and let's continue with the discussion later. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that immersive experience, Gigi Scaria. So we will just have the question and answer session a little later. But before that, I would like to just announce that O has launched an art competition under the theme Science in Art. And we will hear more about it from Utsuk Sharma. But let me quickly introduce him to all of you. Utsuk is a Delhi boy, and he completed his Bachelor of Fine Arts from the College of Art, Delhi. And he works across a variety of media, including painting, handmade collage, installations, video, sound art, and code, exploring anxiety experienced by an environment when we as a species invade a space claimed only by nature. He has exhibited with the Foundation of Indian Contemporary Art, Serendipity Arts Trust, the Russian Science and Cultural Center, and the India Art Fair, amongst others. He has recently exhibited with an art collective in Belgium, and he has completed a residency with an art studio in Serbia, exploring distress signals, forests and within themselves. Utsuk, I would request you to please come up and make the announcement, after which we will move into the Q&A.
Thank you, Nilanjana, for the introduction, and Lakshmi for inviting me to speak. I've been asked to briefly speak on the importance of science in art. So basically, there's a fundamental dependence that art and science have on each other. Artists like Da Vinci and Franz Kessler were inventors and engineers as much as they were traditional artists, and facilitated many of the initial designs, such as the diving bell and the scuba suit, that ended up as precursors to modern diving suits and equipment. Despite a consensus that global warming and environmental degradation are caused by human activities, it remains difficult to hold people accountable within existing frameworks. Disruption of industries and economic institutions is futile without sanctions and verdicts from governments. Therefore, we need to rethink the categories of responsibility and accountability, as well as violence and agency. Innovation through science and technology isn't just a consequence of human nature due to the fact that we are explorers. Innovation is a necessity for an adversarial approach to the obstacles to sustainability. The beauty and sometimes the scary bit about technology is that when it becomes so readily available, the things that took us years to learn and understand have evolved at such a rapid pace that children today grow up with it as the new normal. Technology is integrated in the youngest generation to such an extent that it is a great possibility that creativity and art to come will be heavily dependent on tech rather than traditional means. In that spirit, not just to encourage the traditional, but to support the experimental and innovative, we decided that we should extend the thought of science and art to the younger generation and decided to host an open call for an art competition for students. I'll only go into the details of the age group that it's up to students of about age 22, and there are, of course, cash prizes. And the rest of the details are mentioned on O's website. So please have a look, spread the word, and participate because art and science have their meeting in method, but sometimes how you create the work is just as important as why. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Utsuk, for that. And I would like to say that, today you heard two very, very different kinds of presentations. However, Gigi and Commander Arnab are coming together and they are going to think, collaborate, and there will be an art installation in a few months from now. So the date and the venue, of course, will be announced to all of you soon. But I think that's something we can all look forward to. So very quickly and very briefly, what you just heard today, quite mind-blowing actually, because Commander Das talked of strategic affairs and development and how that development is impacting our environment. He talked of desilting, he talked of dredging. But what essentially came out was every department, every ministry seems to be working in silos. No one's really talking to the other, and everyone's just doing what they think is right and how it's impacting the environment. So basically, he stressed on the need for calibrated shift in our thinking when it comes to climate change assessment. And of course, the narrative needs to change. He talked of blue economy. He talked of mindful research. He talked of soundscape mapping. Very, very interesting things. And, of course, like you said, acoustics is not something that we are very exposed to. So very interesting about, how capability building can happen through effective use of digital tools for intervention. So that was, what Commander Das talked about. And of course, Gigi Scaria shared his experience, the McGeorge Fellowship in Melbourne, and he showed us images of landscapes that help us, force us into thinking about habitat and about urbanization, the natural environment versus the built environment, as he said. And wonderfully ended, he said, art raises questions, and these are questions we need to find answers to. So that was it. And I think wonderful presentations, but we have some questions that people have already sent in to both of you. So I request Lakshmi Krishnakumar, Gigi Scaria and Commander Das to please come up over here. So Lakshmi will, take us through those questions and maybe the two speakers can answer them. And of course, if there are some more questions from the audience, we will take them too.
It's the time is out of joint. This is what Prince of Denmark, Hamlet from Shakespeare's play, and this is what Shakespeare had declared, which was definitely
Half a millennium, close to half a millennium.
and we also are living in the time of generational amnesia. And what have we learned from the past? What is ahead of us? So, some of the questions relate to these aspects. Starting with the first question. For the ancients of India, art held the key to scientific knowledge, but the West held art and science as disconnected entities and as opposites. The fundamental difference in cultural thoughts perhaps is where it all changed. But the present India's attitude is one that was shaped by colonialism, where conceptual understanding of mathematics or other sciences by artists seem to be slumbering within the boundaries demarcated, informally, of course, for artists alone. In this context, the onus is on the science and tech community to lift those boundaries. Arnab, this is for you. Would you like to comment on this?
I think I would agree that, these walls need to be broken. And of course, onus lies with not just science and technology, but the intelligentsia that we claim we are. So we need to connect. And typically, what is happening is like, I gave you an example of India or the tropical region. And when we say traditional knowledge, what has evolved over centuries cannot be ignored on borrowed understanding, right? And that is where, and of course, as you said, there are certain narratives which have been built for Western interest. And if we as natives don't understand that, then we'll obviously have to pay a price. So I think I'll leave it at that.
Gigi, would you agree with that, or do you have something?
Yeah, I do agree with that. And but it's also about art, how that actually been perceived, especially in India. I mean, why this gap is that there was also a lot of temple architecture and murals, and there have been a lot which was in the past. But where exactly you actually disjoined all these connections and where exactly you lost it, we have no clue. Because maybe one option that everyone says about the colonial understanding or their teachings probably have been one aspect, but maybe that is not the only one, because the patrons have probably disappeared and artists have become more and more, pauper, and they probably had not other resources to back up than imagination. Obviously, if there is no wealth, there is nothing much one could imagine.
Thank you. The next is so it is based on C.P. Snow, English novelist and physical chemist, where he cites that scientists and artists could no longer communicate with one another because those in one discipline lacked the knowledge possessed by those in the other. He worried that this mutual incomprehension prevented solutions to social problems. Do you agree with this observation? It's open to both of you to take.
No, certainly. We have, it's, our education has become very straitjacketed. Multidisciplinary efforts are not encouraged. And I think in the typical academic curriculums, the thinking is really not encouraged. And thinking will come only when you have exposure to a vast, perspective. So certainly, I think that's a very important area. And when we call people ask, I'm not from a science background, so do I have a space or do I have a relevance? So I think, when you have to make something work in the real world, it is, like Gigi mentioned about, the temple architecture, there was so much science and technology behind it. And how can it be so much single dimension kind? So definitely, I think that's a very important point, and we need to really look at it. In school curriculum also, art is taken as the most unimportant subject. I think that has to really change.
I agree completely. And also that, and when you look at the Western education system, if you go to any of the museums abroad, and you will see the students are in line, they bring by the teachers to certain paintings or certain artworks, and they will sat the whole day, they will talk about that particular work. and there'll be a lot of inquiries and investigations, and all kinds of background stories would be told in front of them, and they would probably sketch them, and they would enjoy all and each and every aspect of it. And do we ever have any any school initiative to go to enjoy one painting like that happens in our India? So I don't think so.
Yes, rightly said. So this is specifically for you. Your work, of course, you spoke about it, reflects the present state of affairs, yet with a sense of past structure. And you mentioned about history as well. And we live in a time of generational amnesia, where although individuals know the past, they themselves have lived. But collectively, we forget, or for convenience, choose to ignore the natural world as it once was, as the generations pass. Could art prevent generational amnesia?
I don't know that, because the power of artists is still under huge big question mark, because what is the reach of art, and how much people actually care about it and seriously think about it. If you are a movie film star, I mean, whatever you say, the thousands will follow you. And if you say that you are an artist, whatever you say, no one even going to say, what is it. So it's the impact of what kind of impact a society has on these particular areas of segments is very important, and how much that importance can be brought into by the serious engagement with artists and art lovers and makers is what I think we should be looking into.
Yes. I just want, you have two questions here, which both of you have actually touched upon in the presentations. I just will read out the questions because it is already there, but I'll just do that. Virtually all population growth between now and the end of the century will be in cities. Joel Cohen, population expert, has said so. Gigi, your work draws particular attention to the effects of urbanization and migration on landscapes. The question is, what prompted you to engage with these themes compellingly? You covered it, or do you want to say anything in particular? Or?
Well, I mean, just one brief is that probably when I came to Delhi and I was so immersed in looking at a place like this for the largest period of time with a lot of engagement. And that engagement because I am interested in so many areas and aspects, and and city has become one kind of catalyst in which I could actually see all the engagements which I was looking for, all was kind of materializing in different forms and shapes. So for me, it's almost like a being the urban landscape itself. So and it kind of I mean, I've even imagined that is more like an amusement park in one of my show. So it's something which you actually the habitat is also live experience. It's not just it has a separate life. It is you yourself, because that you are the one who is making it, and you are the one who lives in it, and you are the one who actually wanted to see how it looks. So that actually is very important. Therefore, but on top of it, I also have to say that maybe the shift take place in the coming generation may not actually look into cities the way intensively the way we are looking at it. Probably there are habitats, it's more about mindful living, not that a particular space in which you occupy a land and territory and and enjoy your life. That was a kind of feudal way of understanding about living. So that might change eventually.
And Arnab, do you see urbanization and migration having an impact on marine and freshwater ecosystems, especially with blue economy planning and actions? You have covered this. You have sort of answered. You did mention migration as something which...
Quick point is that, in many places, like say, if you look at the fishermen community today, the local people are not involved. Sorry. I mean, in many places, if you look at people engaged in even blue economic activities like fisheries and all, in many places you see migrants who are involved, and the attachment of the migrants to the local ecosystem will be very thin compared to, of a migrant would be very thin compared to a local. And that's having a huge impact on the sustainability of that. But they are just here to make quick buck, and that's also probably one of the reasons why the traditional practices are not getting enough importance. So this is something we need to really think about. When I have been interacting with coastal communities and I see a lot of migrants who are involved there, and they, of course, they are not involved, they are not connected to the local ecosystem. They are just here to do a job, make some money, and go back. So that's a very serious issue we need to look at.
Yes. So this is based on a question by Ragini. She spoke about having to assume responsibility when the going gets tough. So, just to look upon government as well, the official attitudes. Do you think official attitudes towards art and culture shape informal attitude towards the same, or is it vice versa?
Well, I mean, I don't know. Whichever way, if it changes, that would be great. Because right at the moment, it is not. I mean, of course, it's all depends. And, even when we talk about the certain segments in art, people, I mean, maybe the government will spend some money in a particular sector, which is holistically called art. But then what art and where? It's also very important. And there are, fine arts has a lot of categories in which even the way Arnav was talking about, there is also research areas of art, artistic activities, not just only making painting and sculpture and just to exhibit. There are also process-oriented art. Such are the people, those who actually get beneficial from Arnav's, research, and in that sense. So is there, if there is a grant which is provided and where exactly it goes, it only goes to a few people to just give us just give some money, doesn't make any sense. If that has to go through a systematic project which can be pumped with the backup so that, they could actually extensively work on it for a longer period of time. So something of that would be ideal, I would say.
I think the art, culture, economics is a reflection of the political background, and politics is all driven by people. So if you just look at India, I think the growing middle class will actually, at some point, I think there is a change. So when they demand, things, the political class will, of course, come to support that. Like what Gigi said is very important. I mean, if there is enough resources available to an artist, he will not just make some paintings for making money, but he will also invest in going through the whole process of research, and I think that's very important, and that's the ecosystem we talk about. So shaping the ecosystem is what the public wants, and at some point I think we are changing towards the better. Once now kids don't have to worry about getting a job to put food on the table, and that's when they explore different things, and that's how creativity is created. So I think that's my view, that it's again a very political aspect. What you demand will be provided by the political system, and like grants come because there is a demand for it, or people, it looks fashionable, that or whatever you want to say. I mean, fashionable may not be the best word, but it is perceived that this is a good thing to do, and that's how it gets done. Yeah.
So this is about indigenous knowledge. You've covered this. With respect to world oral history or tradition, studies over time conclusively suggest that language, be it any, and literary history contain an accumulated body of knowledge, including about geography, zoology, mathematics, navigation, astronomy, pharmacology, botany, meteorology, and more. So indigenous knowledge is key here. A study that dug into the history of the Amazon rainforest has found that indigenous people living there for millennia with causing no detectable species losses or disturbances. So this is a study that was published, and tree species that now dominates the forest was planted by prehistoric human inhabitants. So in your research too, Arnab, on underwater ecosystem and acoustics, um, how much have you engaged and interacted with indigenous people inhabiting coastal areas and riverbanks?
Probably just not even scratch the surface, but yes, that's something I would really want to do. But there's a lot to be done. I mean, it requires resources. You need to invest a lot. So definitely that's an intention. But to be honest, we have not done much. But yes, that is something. Otherwise, we can't give real world solutions. I mean, if we don't understand, I mean, when we say understanding the region, the ground realities, this is what it is. So there's a lot of work to be done. And of course, I think the literature has not been available so much. So we have to really try to read what is available and then try to reconstruct the past. And then kind of make sense that how much of it is valid in today's context. Then only it is relevant. Otherwise, you'll make something which is not relevant. And of course, then there will be no acceptance of that.
So we've covered all the questions that were submitted to us. Anybody here in the audience, if you have any questions, you can go right ahead, or we can conclude. You have a question.
Arnav, Gigi, thank you so much for the lovely presentation that both of you made. I think it's pretty insightful. Arnav, before I pose a question to you, Gigi, one of the slides that you presented in one of your artworks, which showed that rock, and it had that pond and the buildings that you see. I think I relate very well with that, and I can quote an example in Juhu. There used to be a huge rock. I'm sure you would be knowing about it, or you would be knowing about it. I do not know how true or false, but I believe the theory behind that rock was that when the asteroid hit the Earth somewhere, this was created out of that pressure. So it's at two places on the planet. One is in Juhu, and the other, I think, is in US. But sadly, I think it's hardly there left now, because the real estate lobby has been working around that area, and they have finished off that rock. And there used to be a small temple on the top of it. And when I was in Bombay, I used to see that. But now it's not there. So it's really fantastic that you put that through. Arnav, question to you is that, while we talk about all the capacity building, we talk about so much thing that is happening. It's the point is that these are very close room discussions that happen. I'm sure the children of this age group really do not know what is going on. So when a fact is not reiterated to them, either in their books, or it's just about, somebody coming and making a presentation to them in the schools that dolphins are going, or whales are going, or the tigers are going. So they just see that, all right, they're going. But how does it concern me? My concern is in engineering. My concern is a medicine. So they are neither connected with the area that you're talking about, this field, such a huge field and such an interesting field. Neither they are into it by the heart, because neither are their parents into it. So it's like Jhansi ki Rani to honi chahiye, but mere neighbor ke ghar mein. Mera kya lena dena? So somewhere I think we have to reach out to this audience, and there have been many organizations in various fields who start meeting up with the school children right from their, in music it happens very frequently. And by the time that the child grows into a young man, you really have a lot of appreciation of music or of art. And you see that probably can see a career in that. Or when you come into a bureaucratic position or any power position, you have an appreciation or a brain around it to think through. But in this area, we really haven't touched, the children, or we really haven't touched the educational institutes. So probably if there is a plan that we can have towards that area, maybe if we start now, and since you're talking about that you want to do that, these things, you want to reach out to the fishermen and to those communities, maybe if we can also reach out to the students on a very regular basis and sensitize them on these issues that you've been talking, I think that's really going to build a fruit.
I don't think I can disagree with you. We definitely would like to do that, and we are trying to do it in a small way. But yes, it has to be scaled up at a very different level. Definitely, I mean, that's something has to be done. I mean, you have to reach out to them at a... So, I mean, like as you said, we are now, at least the government is keen that we reach out to even the bureaucracy. So we are now working on some projects where, so it will require sensitization at all levels. So we are definitely doing that, and that's a plan, certainly. I cannot disagree with you at all. It's a very good point. Thank you so much.
Anna, my question is to you again. We talk about underwater domain awareness in this hall, but when it comes to children, the school children, there is a gap which I see because it's not there in the textbook. They are not talking about it. They're not getting to know about it from anywhere. So how can we connect our children with such important domains? So what could be done?
I mean, as I just mentioned, see, we got 10 of our courses approved by the AICT, for the engineering students at least. But we are yet to implement it in any program because, see, I just want to add today, even to go and give a lecture in the school management things like Lakshmi and we did it actually. Both of us went to a particular school on the World Environment Day and, tried to reach out. But there was so much resistance, oh, they are too tight. I mean, the schedule is very tight and, there's hardly any time. But I think, it's not just the underwater. There are probably so many other things also which are equally important. But I think in the school curriculum, there should be some space or some, kind of slots where, such blue sky ideas should be definitely made part of. And so again, here, this will have to reflect in the policy. I mean, the government will have to, or whatever, the policy maker will have to look at this in a way that, there has to be a slot where, something out of the curriculum has to be the kids have to be exposed to something like this. So, I mean, we have done it, and I really appreciate Lakshmi coming together because, sometimes this may become too boring or too, thing for the kids. So she came with the other dimension, and we both did this together. But of course, I mean, I am very keen to scale up, and we'll definitely do it. But of course, there is a limitation of the bandwidth and everything. But definitely, it's important, and we would like to do this. Thank you.
Yes, if I could just add to this. Again, about curriculums and all of that. So we've been working with schools. We've, like Arnab said, it is not easy to, come and say that, okay, listen, we've got this. Now, to make this a part of the curriculum, we can keep waiting. We don't know when that is going to happen. So what O is doing in that area is, so like Arnab said, not just underwater domain awareness. There's so much that, we don't even touch upon, or even, people don't even know about some of the problems that we have today. So, so the curriculum exists, and we are designing courses so that can supplement the present day system, because replacing it is not something that can be quick and effective. So we hold events, we do capacity building programs for teachers, we've done programs for parents, because always to look upon school is something which is very normal. But, if you look at education and learning, 0 to 7 years of, that age and that period is very important for children. So that is even before they are born. So the child psychology and what exposure that parents could also give. So this is also something that we've been talking about. And now it is mandatory that you send your child to school at the age of 6, not before that. So there's so much that we have to do as parents, as, community, neighborhood, the areas where they engage with and find friends. So this is also extremely, extremely important. And a scientific study, conclusive study, talks about 70% of whatever we know as an adult by now, we have learned that in the first 7 years of our life. So that is very huge, what this skill developing and talent and inculcating, all of those things happen much before school time. So this is also one thing that we want to put out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll just quickly want to thank everyone and for coming here and very patiently waiting. We couldn't start on time, and I really, really apologize for that. Some of our friends couldn't make it. I'm told it is an infection, viral infection. And I thought, my friends really just didn't want to come. They've ditched me. But Shruti has confirmed that no, it is in the air. A lot of people have fallen ill. And I apologize for the delayed start. But thank you so much for coming and waiting for this long and listening to the session and taking interest with all the questions as well. I want to thank Arnab and Gigi for taking this up for our foundation day. So we really completed 2 years. I am really happy that we could do that. And I also want to thank all of O's trustees. Two of our trustees are not here, but all the other trustees, Puran, we have Shivraj, who's just about made it, and Ragini is our trustee, and she's been, she arrived here before I did, so thank you so much. And Venkatesh as well, he's not here, he's traveling, he couldn't make it, and Alan Kalikal. So thank you to all our trustees and everyone who supported us and made us believe that we are going somewhere, and what we're doing is very, very relevant. Thank you so much.